Hey, this is Brian here. I'm going to show you how to lay out a grid in perspective. I preset this up here with a bunch of different layers, so we'll just turn on some. So we start off with our horizon line up here. Sorry, let's try this again. Okay, so there's the horizon line. It's about centered in the board. It doesn't need to be exactly. And then we have the center line running down here perpendicular, and then we've kind of just drawn a arbitrary line about 1 inch up from the edge, and this is where we're going to start our measurements. So let's turn that off. And so I've broke this out into about 10 equal spaces here. It doesn't really matter, we're just trying to get an even grid. So measure out, I suggested in the class about every 3 inches. And I think in that case you end up with 8 segments, and I ended up with 10 because I used a different measurement, but it doesn't matter. And then we are going to again, down from the bottom here, just up from the edge, so you're not right on the edge. You want to create a station point, and this kind of represents the top view of how far away you are standing from this picture plane, which is now the horizon line. And so from that station point, we want to draw 2 diagonal lines coming off 45 degrees in either direction. So right there, oops, it's going to do that again. And that would be a 90-degree total. So that's a square, and those will cross the horizon line in 2 places, and those are the diagonal vanishing points. And then additionally, we want to add 2 lines that are 30 degrees, which are these lines here. So these are, the blue lines are 30 degree, 60 degree total, 30 degree on each side. And then where those cross the horizon line, draw a circle from the center of where the center line and the horizon line cross. Draw a circle from the center going out through one of those diagonals, the 30 degree diagonal, and that will give you your center cone of vision. And the next thing is your page. So we're going to kind of draw in a square that's kind of averaging out across that circle. So the stuff in the corners will be slightly distorted because it's out of the cone of vision, and we kind of clipped off the top and the bottom. But this is kind of important to kind of know where our scene's going to set up. Next thing we do, and I'm going to turn off this layer and the cone of vision for now, just so we don't get confused with all this stuff going on. So the next thing we're doing is we're drawing all the lines from our measuring stick across the bottom to our center point, the vanishing point in this case. And so draw those as accurately as you can, because the more accurate you do it, the less problems you have later. And then the first step is to draw a diagonal. Let's squeeze out a little bit here. From one of those diagonal vanishing points. Let's see. Here. Going through to the other opposite corner. And you could do this both ways. I could draw one from this one over to here. I'm going to let that snap. And both of those will yield the same results. Just for clarity, I'm just going to do one. And so we've got this diagonal vanishing point, diagonal going across down to our measurement. And that is going to cross over this. In my case, I've got 10 different measurements. And so it's going to cross over in 10 different places, and that will yield these verticals. So I go horizontally across with my T-square across every one of those intersections, and that should give me, I've got 10 across, that will give me 10 going back in perspective. And notice how these are getting smaller and smaller and tighter as we go back in perspective. Now this square up in this corner looks very distorted, but it's way out of our cone of vision, so that's okay. So now look at the ones that are within our picture plane are looking a little bit more realistic. All right, so this part, we've got this far, and then people were saying, well, I don't quite, how do I get the next group of, to expand that grid out further? So I draw a new diagonal from the diagonal vanishing point, and I'm doing two of them now, one going in each direction, because I want to cross over the back corner of my grid. So that diagonal vanishing point goes through there and all the way off my page, and this one goes through and all the way off my page. And this is going to give me two things. It's going to allow me to expand the grid in this direction because it's crossing over these and these points, and those will go back to the vanishing point. And it's also crossing over these blue ones in the depth field or whatever. So I'm going to take each of those places where it crosses and add the next batch of 10 lines. And you can see these are getting really compressed. I'm going to turn into mush pretty quickly here. So what I'm going to do for the next ones is I'm only going to represent, so I know this is 10 grid spaces, but I still do want some more grid. And so I've done those same diagonals and crossed over where, let's get that, where are we? Where those diagonals cross, I've created these new lines that I'm drawing in purple. 1, 2, 3. And those represent 10 more grid spaces back in depth. And each one of those blue lines, or sorry, purple is 10 more. So if I know what something is here, I can kind of approximate back in space. Now, one thing I didn't do here, and I'll do it in this layer here, is to start expanding the grid out in this direction. Yep. So I'm going to go from my vanishing point through all these diagonals. I'm going to start right here where that crosses over and go back. And then I'm going to find the next crossover point, and that goes back to the horizon, to the center vanishing point. And you notice now I'm expanding my grid outward to the left and right. Now I don't really need so much of it outside of my picture, my green frame there. So I'm not extending these lines terribly far. Now I've run out. I could do one more here. And I've run out of crossovers on this line, but I'm going to go back to that next line, which is here, and add the next one, and then there's a crossover right there. So add that one. There is a crossover here. So add this one. So now I'm expanding the grid out to that side. So I could do the same on the other side. Now in the class I mentioned that our grids are going to represent a human height, each grid unit, but that kind of makes the people kind of small actually. So what I decided in this case is I decided that each of these grid units is going to equal 2.5 feet. And so 2 together will make 5 feet. And so that means that my little character is going to be 1 grid length. My medium-sized character will be 2. And then my giant will be 4. So let's pick a different color here. I'm going to turn down my grid layer now that I've got it, which is, I'm going to turn this one down a little bit, and this one down a little bit, this one down a little bit. There we go. Okay, so it's still there, but I can use these now for, I can see my people a little bit better. So what I'm doing here is let's put another, this is, I put in one little mini character that's 1 grid length. He's on the same plane as my human, so you can kind of see the scale. But let's put another human way back here at the back of my grid. So I'm going to measure across 2 grid lengths, because that's what a human is. And then I'm going to transfer that measurement up vertically. And I'm just kind of eyeballing this, but if I draw a 45-degree angle or an arc through that center point, that should transfer that measurement up to the vertical. And so now I've got my total length. And what I like to do is kind of start with the feet in perspective. So the feet are going to kind of be going out this way. And my waistline, maybe here's my head, some shoulders. And I'm just kind of blocking these out first. I'm going to kind of fill these in later a little bit better. But I need to know how big they are and where they are. So there's 2. Let's put 1 human character way out in the front. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put him about right here. And so I'm going to measure out 2 and then transfer that up. And so that picture plane is cutting through there, but it still gets the person grounded in the right field. So this guy's going to be standing kind of horizontal. And so I'm going to start building him out. And even his shoulders and head, all the kind of cues should kind of go back to that vanishing point if he's sitting perpendicular to the picture plane. So I start building out my guy. And even his waistline should kind of match that. The neckline, the eyes will be going this way. And I don't know what he's going to be doing, but start planning out your scene. He's holding something. I don't know what that is. And now the rest of him is out of the picture plane, so I don't really need to map this out too much. But the important thing is a lot of times I start with the feet, because my giant here is standing, and I want him to be kind of grounded, and then I'll start building up from there so that he feels like he's actually standing in the proper place. Even the little guy, his feet will be kind of coming in this direction out towards you, and I could start building up with some ellipses and figure out what he's doing too. I don't know. So you want to kind of think about some sort of actions that these guys are doing. Lastly, if there's somebody standing on something like a rock or whatever that's a different height, let's get another color. We're almost done here. Let's pick, no, we got lots of reds here. Let's turn that down. I'll try orange. So let's say I have another human. We've got this guy already. We figured him out. He's here. And let's say there was a, like I said, a rock here. And this is kind of important. I want to, let's say this is kind of a, it's a arbitrary rock, but I want it to be relatively roundish. So I counted out 4 squares, and that's going to represent my kind of rock base. So I'm going to draw kind of an ellipse in that space. And then I'm going to go up maybe 1 square, so I'm going to kind of measure out here about there. And so there's my rock. So now I've moved up 1 square, so this new character is going to be, let's find the center of this. This is the center of the rock here. He's going to be standing in the center. So I've measured out those 2 feet here, and I'm going to transfer that up here, and you should measure that and transfer it. I'm just doing this quickly here. And so this guy is standing up on this rock now. So he's the same height as this guy, or a little bit bigger because he's just slightly forward, but he looks taller because he's standing on this rock now. And with that, I'm going to stop. And thanks for watching my show.